What's up guys, Agent here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Dragonknight tank. So Dragonknight tanks are still among the top class for tanking, just because of the natural passives and abilities that Dragonknights bring to the table, as well as some really nice sustainabilities. So most endgame tanks you're going to see are going to be Dragonknights, just because of that. They're usually the easiest classes in order to get into the whole tanking, and there's a little bit of a much more shallow learning curve, so you don't have to necessarily take a lot of time to learn how the class plays in order to kind of get into the groove of tanking. So just like our other build videos, we're talking about the gear, and I'll be talking about a lot of different gear combinations you can go through as a tank. Go over skills, and just like with gear, I'm going to be talking about a lot of different skills. So those two sections of this build video are going to take up a lot of time, just because there's so many things I do want to cover, because as a support role, your job is to support. And that's going to, and the needs of the group are going to change from trial to trial, from fight to fight. So we do want to give you guys an idea of what your options are. We'll also talk about RCP and then everything else that you're going to need to know in order to kind of make this build yourself. So this is only just one kind of combination of gear, and this is kind of the sets that I default to usually. But by all means, but by no means is this the only kind of setup you should use. Like I said, I'll be talking about all the different gear combinations and kind of a quick brief summary as to when you would use which sets. And then towards the end of this video, I won't be talking about a rotation, because obviously tanks don't have a rotation. You're going to kind of be a little bit reactionary, and hopefully a little bit use a little bit of pro action as well when you're tanking. And everybody has their own different tanking style, but I'll talk a little bit about what my tanking style is, what I prioritize, and kind of how I approach tanking in general. So let's go ahead and start things off first with our gear. So like I said, this is kind of my default set. So whether it's dungeons or trials, I'm usually going to just go to this set first, just because this is what I know will work very, very well. So for our monster helm, you have a lot of different monster helm sets that you could wear here, but I'd like to default to Warden. This comes from Imperial City Prison, so you do need the IC Imperial City DLC in order to get it. So Lord Warden, when you take damage, you have a 50% chance to summon a shadow orb for 10 seconds that increases the physical and spell resistance of you and your allies 8 meters by 30 to 70. So this effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Because you're taking damage fairly often, you usually have pretty much 100% uptime on that 2-piece effect. Which means you have the most consistent resistance buffs while you're wearing Lord Warden. It's also the highest resistance buff while you're wearing it. In addition, the additional Shadow Orb does provide some additional resistances to anybody within 8 meters. This is normally only going to be your stamina DPS, but in certain trash fights where everybody's stacked up, they could also affect your magic DPS. And as far as I know, there's no limit to how many people can be affected by it. So this will give you and your allies about 6% additional mitigation if they're not already at resistance cap. This can be very, very helpful for DPS spell abilities. That's why I like to default to Lord Warden. It's just very good for my own personal spell resistance, but it also affects resistances of everybody else nearby. Now, there are some other monster helm sets that I do want to point out here that you might want to consider running. So Bloodspawn is another set that I also default to very often. When you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 14 ultimate and increase your spell and physical resistance by 6450 per 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds, so this is more of an ultimate generation set because of that low proc chance. Yes, you are taking a pretty decent amount of damage, so it's actually kind of easy to get Bloodspawn to proc. You can normally get it to proc usually every 8 or 9 seconds or something like that, but this is more about generating ultimate, less so about getting your resistances up to cap. I'll talk a little bit about resistances in a later video as to why you don't necessarily need to hit the resistance cap as a tank, but Bloodspawn, the idea behind it is you're comfortable with the fight. You don't necessarily need the additional resistances from Lord Warden. Your DPS don't necessarily need additional resistances, so you just want that additional ultimate to be able to get more Warhorns out. So that's kind of when you would use Bloodspawn. Earthgore is another set that you could wear as a tank. It's not going to be quite as common or quite as popular, and it's kind of used in very few fights generally. So when you heal a friendly target that's under 50% health, and that does include you as well, you conjure a pool of punching blood underneath them, which soaks up an enemy placed effect instantly and heals all friendly targets in the area for, in this case, 34,200 health over 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 35 seconds. So this is more used when you need to self-sustain and you need the additional heal. It is a very, very long cooldown compared to the other sets, so it is 35 seconds. But when it does proc, you can pretty much get a really nice chunk of healing centered around you. You'll usually see Earthgore being worn in fights where you're taking large chunks of damage all at once. So classic examples of this would be Asylum as the main tank, and then Cloud Rest. Usually the main tank and the 2 off tanks will be wearing Earthgore. So it's very niche, but where it is used, it is quite useful. Continuing on, talked about Lord Warden. Thurvokun is another one, so this is from Vet Fangler, so you will need the DLC, Dragon's DLC. When a nearby enemy damages you, you summon a growing pool of desecrated bile for 8 seconds. Enemies in the bile receive, in this case, 451 disease damage every 1 second, and are afflicted with minor maim and minor defile, reducing their damage done and healing received by 15%. This effect can occur every 8 seconds. Again, this is pretty much has no cooldown because the proc lasts for 8 seconds and it's on an 8-second cooldown. Since you're taking damage usually very constantly as a tank, you pretty much have this out at all times. Now the damage is obviously very small. You're not really wearing it for the damage. You're wearing this for the minor maim and minor defile. So minor maim reduces damage on by 15%. Now if you're up against a single target enemy, so there's like a boss with no ads, Thurvokun obviously isn't very useful because if you're using Heroic Slash, that applies to minor maim, so obviously you can't stack them together. But in Trash Bowl, so for example in VMAW, Thurvokun can be quite useful because now you're able to apply minor maim to a bunch of different targets all at once, helping to reduce their damage done. So that's really helpful. More in Trash Bowls. So sometimes you'll be wearing Thurvokun for Trash Bowls. This is going to be more often used in like VMAW, maybe Sanctum Ophidia, Halls of Fabrication on Trash Bowls, but once you get to the boss fights, you'll normally swap this out for something like Lord Warden instead. Vykosa is a new Monster Helm set from Moonhunter Keep, so you will need the Wolfhunter DLC in order to get it. So when you bash an enemy you've taunted, you frighten them with a deafening howl, applying major maim to them for 3 seconds, lowering their damage done by 30%. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. Now, this is a pretty useful set, and it's very useful on certain fights. Again, this isn't going to be used in every single fight because it does require some timing involved, and you kind of need to know the fight. So the effect can occur every 15 seconds, and the debuff, the major maim debuff, lasts for 3 seconds. So basically, you're going to need to kind of time this correctly, and it's only when you bash an enemy that you've taunted. So major maim reduces damage by 30%, and this does stack with minor maim as well. Of course, the downside is you have to bash the very long cooldown, but there aren't very many sources of major maim. The only other one I can think of is going to be Nova from Templars. So having another source of major maim that you can fairly reliably choose when to apply is going to be very strong. So classic examples where you might want to use Vykosa might be when you're learning how to tank the warrior in HRC. If you can time this down with his channel sweeps, you can pretty much take a lot less damage for those 3 seconds. Another example might be for execute phases on certain fights. So for example, the mage or assembly general in halls, you'll only be able to apply it 3 seconds every 15 seconds, but that major maim does help reduce that execute damage to help keep your DPS alive. So Vykosa is definitely a set that you want to pick up, but again, it is kind of has niche uses overall. Those are the main Monster Helm sets that you're going to be wearing instead of Warden. Alright, so now that we've talked about Monster Helm sets, let's talk about the body set. So this is the set that you're going to be wearing at all times. So generally speaking, you have 2 sets that you're going to be wearing as a tank. So the first set is going to be Ebon. Ebon, you can get this from Crypt of Hearts, 1 or 2. The 5-piece increases max health by 1118 for you and up to 11 other group members within 28 meters of you. So this is a very powerful group buff. So it just increases max health, increases availability. So overall, very, very useful. So you always want 1 tank wearing Ebon. And if you have two or more tanks, it's generally going to be the tank that's going to be with the group more often or at all times. So sometimes it's going to be the main tank, sometimes it's going to be the off tank. It really depends on which fight you guys are tanking. So for example, in Cloud Arrest, It's usually going to be the main tank that's going to be wearing Ebon because they're always up in the real world, and then the two off tanks are going to go down the shadow world. So if only one of the off tanks has Ebon, when one of the tanks goes to the shadow world, the people in the real world will lose the Ebon buff. So that's kind of where you would run Ebon instead. So that's just something you want to keep in mind when you're wearing Ebon. Now, other sets you could run instead of Ebon, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of these, is going to be Akaviri Dragonguard is the first one. So this reduces the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. This is basically here for the Warhorn uptime, reducing the cost of your ultimate by 15%. This drops Warhorn from 250 down to 213. So it's a little bit easier to get that Warhorn up, increasing the uptime of your major force. So pretty useful. I did the math, and it's usually going to be an increase of roughly like 6 or 7% if you're able to get it off like on cooldown. Other sets you could wear, talked about Ebon already. Haven of Ursus is a new set that comes from March's Sacrifices. So that's one of the new dungeons in the Wolfhunter DLC. So when you take damage while you're under 50% health, summon Ursus' spirit for 6 seconds at a random group member. This also can include you. You or an ally can activate a synergy on Ursus to grant you a shield that protects you and the activator from, in this case, 13,954 damage for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 12 seconds. Now, this Haven of Ursus is an interesting set, and I'm including it here as a potential option here. One for the shield. The shield is nice. It's larger than most other shields that you'll get from the synergy, but also because you can actually activate the synergy as well. So it's a synergy that you can activate that you created yourself. This basically helps Alkosh uptime. Now, it does spawn on a random group member, so that's kind of downside here. So it's only really going to be helpful to maintain Alkosh uptime if everybody's kind of like stacked up against the bosses, but that way you're able to hit that synergy. So it's not going to be very useful all the time, but this is a set that you might want to consider getting and holding on to. Jailer's Tenacity is another set. This is another niche use set. So when you lose 25% or more of your health from a single attack, you gain major vitality for 6 seconds, increasing healing received by 30%. This comes from Moonhunter Keep, which is the other dungeon that came out with Wolfhunter, so you will need Wolfhunter to get this. Now, like I said, this is going to be a niche set, so you have to lose a quarter or more of your health from a single attack. So obviously there are a few attacks out there that do deal that much damage to you. A classic example would be Zamaja's Heavy Attack. Or Baneful Mark during Zamaja Execute. So when that happens, you gain that major vitality, which helps improve your healing received. So this is, again, something that you're going to want to use for very specific fights, but you do want to hold on to it for those fights. So this is not a set you'll be wearing very often, but when you will wear it, it's going to be pretty effective overall. Aegis of Galenwe is another interesting set that you might want to hold on to. It might not necessarily be useful in vet trials, but it'll be potentially very strong in 4-man content. So one of the bonuses of wearing Aegis of Galenwe is that you gain minor Aegis, which reduces the damage you take by 5%. It's going to be a little bit less than that just because of the way the mitigation works, but it is useful nonetheless. So after successfully blocking, you have a 50% chance to grant Empower to 3 allies within 15 meters, increasing the damage of the next light attack by 4%. This effect can occur once every 1 second. So this set has kind of 2 requirements. So first is you have to successfully block, so you have to be getting hit by a lot of enemies. So again, it's not going to be very useful in every single scenario. And then the second is that it grants Empower to 3 allies within 15 meters. Now, we're not sure if it is the closest 3 allies or random 3 allies, so it's only 3 people. So that's why in trials, it's not going to be the best, because it could go to your healer, it could go to the other tank, of course, where Empower is not going to be quite as strong. However, it's a classic example of when you would want to use Galenwe is going to be in Dragonstar Arena. You're taking a lot of damage from, a lot of different sources, you're constantly blocking, and you only have usually 2 or 3 DPS. Sometimes 2, usually 3, depends on how your group is set up for DSA. But in this way, you can pretty much get Empowered to your allies fairly regularly. So that's one of the situations where you would want to use Galenwe, and other 4-man content, Galenwe is going to be pretty strong as well. So it's, again, a set you want to hold on to, but not necessarily one you can be wearing in every single fight. And finally, we have, I think this is the last one that we'll talk about. Yeah, so this is the last one. It's going to be Plague Doctor. This is just stack health on health on health. So 5-piece, it's purple, so it's 3861, but when you gold it out, it adds 4,000 max health. So this is just super selfish. You just stack a bunch of health on top of it. This is usually the set that I personally default to when I don't have to wear Ebon, just because it gives me the most amount of max health, so that just helps out my survivability. Otherwise, I will usually go to Dragonguard for the additional Warhorn uptime. Plague is usually more often used in progression style fights, just because of that additional survivability. But once you get very used to the fight, so for example, in like all the Traveler trials, basically, I don't wear Plague Doctor if I'm the off tank. I'm usually going to be wearing Akaviri Dragonguard instead. So those are kind of the sets that you could run instead. Now for the second set here, I'm running Alkosh. Alkosh is still the strongest debuff set in the game that tanks can wear. So this is a medium armor set, so we need to run the jewelry and the weapons. So when you activate a synergy, you send a shockwave from your position that deals 1806 physical damage, an additional X amount of physical damage over 10 seconds, and it reduces dispel and physical resistance of any enemy hit by 3010 for 10 seconds. And this does stack with other sources of reductions to enemy resistances. So major breach, minor breach is a good example. So again, very, very strong debuff because it stacks on top of all that stuff. So it's very, very useful. And it's one of the strongest debuff sets in the game right now for tanks to wear. So most tanks will be wearing Alkosh. It's just that powerful. So now let's talk real quick about let's go over weapons first. So I have sword and board on my front bar. It doesn't have to be a sword. It can be a dagger, it can be an axe, it can be a mace, whatever you happen to get. And it is Alkosh. And then on my back bar, I do have an ice staff with Alkosh as well. Now for my weapons, I have Infused and I have double crusher enchants. But you don't have to run a front bar crusher if you don't want to. So if you are running, and I'll talk about this when I go over skills, if you are running Blockade, you're able to proc crusher if you swap to your front bar while Blockade is down. And it will remember that it is infused. So you could run a different enchant on your front bar. So for example, a weakening enchant, you could run something like Absorb Stamina if you'd like, or you can do the reverse. You can put Absorb Stamina on the back bar here, so that way you have constant stamina regen coming in from Blockade while you're blocking. And then you can have the crusher on the front bar here. Kind of up to you what you want to do, but those are a few options out there. So play around with the enchants. My personal fit that I'm probably going to end up doing is I might use a Absorb Stam enchant on the back bar and just keep pressure on the front bar here. So for my shield, I do have Prismatic enchant, so Tri-Stat with Sturdy just to help reduce the cost of block. Now for jewelry, there's a bunch of different things you can do with jewelry. So I'll just talk really quick about what I have and why I use it. So I have 2 infused with shield plate enchants. That's just to help reduce the cost of block. And then I have 1 reduced stamina cost enchant with a swift bonus. So swift increases movement speed by 10%. So while you might not think that's very useful in PvE, it actually can be very helpful. It just helps you move around a lot faster. So if you're in a fight where you have to move around a lot, it helps you get from point A to point B faster. So you're wasting less time, wasting less stamina of sprinting. So that swift is, I like it. You don't have to use it though. So I personally prefer infused. There are other traits you can run too. You can run triune, which is basically max health, max stam, max magic. It's basically like a triglyph except for jewelry. So you can go with that. You can go with robust if you need the extra stamina. You can go with healthy if you need the extra health. There's a lot of different combinations you can go for. In terms of enchant, shield play is generally going to be best if you want to reduce the cost of block. I have a reduced feat cost here just because I do like to try to weave heroic slash fairly often to help maintain my crusher uptime. So that's why I have that there. But you can run something like a potion cooldown glyphs, especially if you combine it with infused and you're an Argonian. That if you have one glyph, infused potion cooldown glyph is 8 seconds taken off of your potion cooldown. So with 3 of them, you can drop your potion cooldown to 21 seconds. So that really helps out your resources returned. But again, you have to drink a lot of potions to do it. So it is a fairly expensive trade-off there. For armor, I have health on my small pieces, and they're all sturdy. And my large pieces I've infused with prismatic enchants. That just help out our general resource pool overall. So that is all I have to say about gear-wise. So let's talk about our character sheet. So this will be we're going through this a lot faster. So I am a Dark Elf. Generally speaking, you can be really any race. Race doesn't really play as big of an impact on tanking as it does with like DPS. The widely regarded best race for tanking is going to be the Argonians. They get 9% max health, 3% max magicka, you get 5% healing done and received, so that's 10% for your self heals. But the big thing is they get the potion passive. So whenever you drink a potion, you gain back about 4,000 max magicka, or 4,000 magicka health and stamina. So that's really helpful for your sustain overall. So Argonians are usually regarded as the best race. The second best is usually going to be considered the Imperial. So you will need to have access to the Imperial edition so you can play as that race. So they get 12% max health, 10% max stamina, and they get additional health back whenever they deal a direct damage every couple of seconds or so. So Imperials are regarded as the best one just because they get so much health and they get so much stamina, which is super, super helpful. But like I said, you can really play with any race you want. It's kind of up to you. I have tanked on a Dark Elf for a very long time, and I managed to clear most of the hardest content in the game with them. So race is kind of up to you which one you want to pick. Generally speaking, though, those with stamina, max stamina boost are going to be a little bit better overall, and anyone with max health boost is going to be a little bit stronger overall as a tank. Now for attributes, this is going to be kind of up in the air as well, just because of the different tanking styles that people have. So me personally, I have 44 health, 14 stamp, 6 magicka. Sometimes I put a little bit more into health if I feel like I need it for progression style runs. So there's a lot of flexibility here as to what you can do. So generally speaking, the health you want to hit is going to be roughly 35k or so. That's just so it's just kind of you're at a point where you're just tanky enough to survive most of the hard hits. So when I'm wearing something like Dragonguard and Alkosh, I have maybe around 32, 33k max health, which is perfectly fine for me. But if you feel like you need more survivability, by all means, you can shift some points into health if you'd like to get yourself a little bit more health. The most important thing that you're going to want to do here is to make sure your max stamina is higher than your max magicka. And that's just because of the way shards and orbs work. They return your highest resource pool. So if your max magicka is higher than your max stamina, then it'll return magicka instead of stamina, which is not what we want. We want it to return stamina, so that way we can, keep up our blocking. So that's the one thing that you do want to watch out for when you are playing around with the attributes. And this is going to vary a lot depending on people's tanking styles and their race preferences. For Wonder Stone, we're going with the Atronach, so that way we can get some more magicka regen. Remember that when you're blocking, your stamina regen goes down to 0. So you will only be able to get stamina back through things like the Master Staff, if you are getting the Master Staff on you, or things like Absorb Stamina enchants that are going off. So you're going to want to rely on your magicka regen just because you're able to get back magicka back, and there is a passive under the DK Earth and Heart skill line that will basically convert magicka to stamina. So we want to make sure we have very good magicka overall. Now for food, we have purple tri-foods. This boosts our max magicka, max health, and max stamina. Then for potions, the potions we're using are going to be Essence of Health. So this gives us, restores all of our stats, so health, magicka, stamina, and also gives us the respective major regen buffs. But there are a few other potions you can run. For example, there is a potion of lingering health, potion of major vitality, basically. So that's a potion you will see very commonly used in Cloud Rest. Let me just put it up here for you. Oops. So that's made with beetle scuttle, butterfly wings, and I believe it's imp stool. I think it's imp stool. Oh no, scrib jelly. Do this again. So it's potion of lingering health, which basically gives you a very nice kind of heal over time. So you can see here 1k health every second, plus it gives you major vitality, so it increases your healing taken. So this is another potion that you might want to use. Obviously it won't give you stamina or magicka back, so I would recommend running this potion if you're an Argonian, because every potion is essentially a mini tripod for you. But tri-potion are generally going to be your go-to for potions overall. Alright, so let's talk about our skills. We're on our skills now. Starting off with our front bar, we have Pierce Armor, Heroic Slash, Fragmented shields. These three are what I like to call staples. You need to have these. Now, some people might be wondering whether you want to use Fragmented or Igneous shields. So me personally, I prefer Fragmented shields for the additional major mending uptime. But you can go with Igneous if you'd like for the additional shields. I will be releasing a video later on kind of describing why I think Fragmented is stronger and kind of why a 3 times damage shield does not necessarily translate to mitigating 3 times more damage. The damage shields kind of have play a little bit weird when it comes to mitigation, so I will kind of do a video on that at a later point. But for me, that additional major mending is going to be stronger than the larger shield. The shield that you give to your allies are going to be exactly the same. So Igneous shield just increases your personal shields. But with Fragmented shield, you're able to basically maintain 100% up from major bending, which is really helpful for Vigors as well as your self heals. Green Dragon Blood, I have this on the front bar, but it doesn't have to be on the front bar. So this is a must-have skill, but you don't have to put it on the front bar. And then Engulfing Flames. This is, a lot of tanks consider this to have a must-have, but it really depends on how comfortable your group is and how many stamina DPS you have. So if you have a lot of stamina DPS, Engulfing Flames is not going to be as strong. If you have a lot of Magicka DPS, like in Cloud Rest or Asylum, then Engulfing Flames becomes a lot stronger because it does increase fire damage that the enemy takes. So that's kind of how you decide whether or not you want to run Engulfing Flames or not. For ultimate, I'm running Temporal Guard, but you can go with a different ultimate if you'd like. So Temporal Guard gives us minor protection while it's slotted, so it reduces damage taken by 8% while we're on our front bar. But if you want some more regen, you can go with Barrier instead, because that'll give you up to 10% Magicka regen from the Magicka 8 passive. And if you're starting to learn content, Magma Shell is actually a very nice one to have. It basically reduces all incoming damage to 3% of your max health. So it's really, really strong. It's basically, you push it and you're pretty much going to be invincible for 11 seconds of the duration of the ability. So don't discount running Magma Shell. Don't be afraid of running Magma Shell, just to kind of show how macho you are as a tank. Run it if you need to, if you feel like you need that additional damage mitigation. On our back bar, I have Inner Rage here, so I'm actually going to swap this out, but we have Hardened Armor, but normally I have Balance, or I'm running Deep Thoughts here, and I'll talk a little bit about why, when, and where I'll use both of them. And then I have Choking Talons as a flex spot, Unrelenting Grip as a flex spot, and then Blockade of Frost. This is kind of a flex spot here. And our ultimate is going to be Aggressive Warhorn. So we do have several flex spots here as a tank. So Engulfing Flames, this is considered a flex spot for me. Again, it kind of depends on the content that you're running. And then Choking Talons and Unrelenting Grip are both flex spots. So you have 3 flex spots overall to run with. If you're doing Blockade, you don't have to run Blockade. You do want to have at least one Destro Staff ability, so it's Element of Rain, Crushing Shock. You can kind of pick and choose which one you want to put down here. But you do want to have a Destructive Staff ability down here, so this is not really a flex spot at all. Now I did mention when you would want to run Balance versus when you would want to run Hardened Armor versus when you want to run the Sigil Order Skill Tree Deep Thoughts. So you do obviously need a source of Major Ward and Major Resolve, so that limits you to running either Balance or Hardened Armor. Balance will give you, basically reduces your health and you gain Magicka. And it gives you Major Resolve, Major Ward as a result of this. You also get a debuff, a unique debuff that reduces your healing done and damage shield strength by 50% for 4 seconds. So you do want to be a little bit careful with Balance because it does reduce your damage shield and it does reduce your healing done to yourself. So your self heals are 50% less effective for 4 seconds. You do want to kind of time this a little bit. You do want to be a little bit careful, and it does give up some health. So obviously you don't necessarily want to do this if you know your healer's dead. But it does, I prefer Balance overall just because it gives me my sustain and it gives me my major resistance buff. So I gain an extra slot because I don't have to use Hardened Armor anymore. Now, Sigil Order Deep Thoughts is also another skill that you might want to run instead of Balance. This does not give you Major Ward and Major Resolve, so you will need to run Hardened Armor instead if you want those buffs. So if you're running Deep Thoughts, you lose out one of your flex spots because you do need to run Hardened Armor now for your Major Ward, Major Resolve. But Deep Thoughts returns all of your resources, so it returns health, magic, and stamina every 1 second. Now the downside is this is a channeled ability, so you can't block while this is going on. The kind of mitigate that a little bit, if you have Deliberation, which is a passive on a Siege Order line, you will gain major protection while you have reduces your damage done taken by 30%. So that's something that kind of helps mitigate a little bit of the block, the inability to block, but it's obviously not a perfect solution because blocking reduces damage taken by a much larger proportion. So the Deep Thoughts has a trade-off of you don't have to give up health, it actually restores your health, and it also restores stamina as well. So kind of pick and choose when you want to run which abilities. So for me, I like to run Deep Thoughts in fights where I know I have a lot of downtime, where I know I can drop block for 3 or 4 seconds at a time. But otherwise, I'm going to be running Balance because Balance will allow me to block, and I'm usually getting lots of heals from my healer, so don't need to worry about that health penalty when I use Balance. So again, pick and choose, figure out which one you want to run. Another upside of running Deep Thoughts is that you also have a Siege Order ability slotted, so you get Deconcentrated Barrier, which gives you that 5,000 damage shield. And that's another advantage of running Temporal Guard here. You get additional damage shield while you're on your front bar. So those are kind of the skills here. So there's a lot of different options you can run here. And for your flex spots, yeah, you have so many options here. So if you need to purge anything, if you like remove debuffs, you have efficient purge. If you need to efficient heal, you can run Equate Vigor. If you're going for a speed run, you can go with Rapids. You can run Ring of Preservation for execute phases, like in Assembly General for the minor protection to the group. Let's see what else here. You can run Deep Breath if you need kind of an AoE interrupt. Reflective Plate will actually give you immunity to snares and mobilization, so it's more of a PvP thing, but it might be useful in PvE. So you have quite a few options when it comes to flex spots here. You can go with Blood Altar for the healing synergy. You have Blood Feast synergy. I can go Bone Surge for the damage shield it gives to your allies, as well as the main vitality buff. This is more of an off tank if you're not main tanking. You can go with Energy Orbs to kind of give your healers back some resources as well, because they can't pop their own orbs. So you have a lot of different options when it comes to those flex spots. So play around a little bit, see what your group needs, see what each fight looks like for you. Now for our champion points, so the CP cap is 780, which means we have 260 points to put across each of the 3 different constellation types. Starting with the lever, we have 64 in Arcanist and 52 into Tenacity. That gives us 120, which gives us our Wind Runner. Movement speed is pretty useful. It's more useful than you would think. Then we have 66 in the Shadow Ward, 34 into Tumbling, and 40 into Warlord. You can divide the points in Warlord and Tumbling however you'd like. I would at least put, I believe 61 is the next down jump point for Shadow Ward. So I'd put like 61 or 66 in the Shadow Ward and then play around with the remaining points however you'd really like. For our blue CPs, I have 75 into Blessed, 100 into Elfborn, 81 to Precise Strikes, and 4 into Physical Weapons Expert. That's just because I needed to put it somewhere. You can, of course, go 100 and then put the remaining 60 into Precise Strikes if you'd like. So Precise Strikes, if you're going to be using Vigor, then you're going to want Precise Strikes. But other than that, you can kind of put the points wherever you'd like. The biggest thing here is you're going to want 100 Elfborn, 100 Blessed, to increase your healing done. So that includes your self-heals, and then whenever you crit heal with Green Dragon Blood, Elfborn will increase the amount that you heal by a good amount here. Then for our red CPs, this is kind of a more balanced approach to your red CP, so it's not necessarily going to give you the best mitigation, but it's going to give you very good mitigation across each of the different trials. So you might want to shift points around depending on the specific trial and the type of damage you're going to be taking. 72 into Ironclad, 56 into Thick Skin, 64 into Hardy, and Elemental Defender. Leaving just 4 points, which I put in the quick recovery here for the additional healing received. But again, you can kind of shift points around depending on the trial that you are running. So for example, in Cloud Rush, you may want to put a bit more points in the quick recovery in order to help combat that painful mark. All right, so that, I believe, is all of the build information. So now let's talk about tanking mindset. So everybody tanks a little bit differently. Everybody has different priorities, different tanking styles. So I'm just going to describe my personal style. My style of tanking is focused less on, tanking, so to say, and more on buffing and debuffing. So for me, I try to maintain, blockade if I can, Obviously, it's going to be dependent on the fight, so that way I can keep on having my enchant going. Now that the enchants on the back bar will proc while you're on your front bar, this is going to be even more important for things like Absorb Stam, so I get my stamina back while I'm blocking on my front bar, or Crusher, that improves my Crusher uptime. But generally speaking, there are a couple of things that every tank does the same. So the first thing that everyone does the same is to try to maintain Heroic Slash. So Heroic Slash gives us our minor maim, so it inflicts minor maim, which decreases damage coming in, so that's always useful, damage mitigation. And then it also gives us minor heroism, so that gives us one ultimate every 1.5 seconds, just gives us faster ultimate generation so we can get a Warhorn up faster. So that's obviously one thing that all tanks aim for, 100% Heroic Slash uptime. And then obviously we also want to maintain our taunts, whether that's Pierce Armor or Inner Rage. And if you're running Engulfing Flames, try to get as high of an uptime on Engulfing Flames as you can. So with Fragmented Shield, you're going to try to be running this every 6 seconds for the Mountains Blasting passive, so you get 3 ultimate every 6 seconds when you use it, as well as Helping Hands, so you get that additional stamina back whenever you use it. So that's why we have Fragmented Shield here. If you use it every 6 seconds, you get pretty much 100% uptime with Major Mending. You get the maximum amount of ultimate generation, additional ulti-gen, and you get some nice stamina return as well. Green Dragon Blood, you kind of want to try to keep this up as long as you can. That's just for the Draconic Power passives here. So while it's active, while you have Green Dragon Blood active, you get 12% additional healing received, plus you get the different buffs. You get Major Fortitude, Major Endurance, and Minor Vitality. So I like to try to keep Green Dragon Blood up for the harder fights. Don't want to necessarily use it only when you need the heal. You just try to want to keep it up with a minor vitality as well as 12% additional healing received from Burning Heart. So that's one thing that some tanks vary on. So I kind of hold off a little bit on Green Dragon Blood a little bit. I don't have it up all the time, but some tanks swear by maintaining Green Dragon Blood all the time. And obviously, you kind of want to make sure to have your Major Resolve, Major Ward up at all times. So whether that's through balance or Heart of Armor, just make sure to have that up as much as you can. And then once your Warhorn is up, obviously if there's no other Warhorn buff up, then you want to use it. And by Warhorn buff, I mean Major Force. So the Warhorn buff itself lasts for 30 seconds, Major Force lasts for 10. So you can overlap Warhorns. You just don't want to overlap Major Force. You want to have that Major Force run the full 10 seconds before you use Warhorn again. So that's kind of what you want to do there when you're taking a look at Warhorns. Obviously, it's very hard for me to describe how to tank without actually showing you any tanking stuff. But I've been tanking for Mayflower and Hellfire Dominion for our runs now for quite a while, so just take a look back at my past streams so you guys can get an idea of what my tanking style looks like. It's probably a lot of Cloud Rest, but I'm going to try to mix it up, diversify it a little bit, particularly with the Hellfire Dominion runs. Alright, so that is it for this build video. If you guys have any comments or questions about this video, this build, or tanking in general, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. And if I can't find, if I don't have the answer, then I'll try to find somebody who can answer it for you guys and get that answer back to you guys as quickly as I can. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.